Hello dear students. In my previous session, we were discussing about Vandana Shiva's one of the famous formative essays, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Forest. In our previous session, we discussed the early part of her essay. We discussed about Vandana Shiva, Vandana Shiva's parents. We also discussed about conservation of the forest and biodiversity, Chipko movement, and the results of deforestation. Today, let us discuss the further part of the essay. Before that, let us brush up whatever we have discussed in our previous class in a very large scale. So, what are the results of deforestation that we had discussed in our previous class? So, the results of deforestation, they are landslides, scarcity of water, fodder and fuel. So, if forest disappears, obviously those peasant women, they don't get the water in the nearby place. As we have already discussed, scarcity meant longer walks for collecting water, fodder and fuel. Fodder is nothing but the food for their cattle. Fuel, the firewood that you use to cook. Scarcity meant longer walks. So you just understand. So I have already told you, we are living in a patriarchal society where women have to do all the daily course. They are the one who cook food for the family, and they are the one who collect the fodder, who collect the water. So if they don't get these basic needs in the nearby places, it means a longer walks. They have to walk to a considerable distance to fetch the water, to collect the fodder and the fuel. So you just imagine, how do they carry water in a very big pots, one on their head, another one on their waist. Do you think it is not a difficult task? It is a heavier burden for those women to conduct these courses. So realizing these problems, the peasant women of Garhwal have came out in defense of the forest. We also have seen one of the folk songs that Vandana Shiva has mentioned in her essay, where it talks about the oaks and rhododendrons, which helps the human life, which nourishes the human life, because they are the ones, those who provide us the source of life, the cool water, pure water. So we discussed these things in our previous class. Let us continue. Vandana Shiva continues. In 1973, I had gone to visit my favorite forest and swim in my favorite stream before leaving for Canada to do my PhD. But the forests were gone and the stream was reduced to a trickle. I decided to become a volunteer for the Chipko movement, and I spent every vacation doing padayatras, walking pilgrimages, documenting the deforestation and the work of the forest activists, and spreading the message of Chipko. So she says, in the year 1973, see, Chipko movement started in the 1970s, but here in the year 1973, Vandana Shiva had visited one of her favorite places in the forest before leaving for Canada to do her PhD. In fact, Vandana Shiva completed her PhD in philosophy. Before leaving for Canada, Vandana Shiva wanted to visit one of her favorite places where she used to swim, where she used to play in her childhood. But now, when she visited that place, forests were not there, streams were not there, forests were disappeared, streams were reduced to a trickle. They reduced in their size. They seemed like a small puddle. So you should know one thing. One of the surveys of Michigan University says, today millions of hectares of ecosystem is being destroyed every year. See, as we know, 25% of the land is covered by forest. 25% of the land on earth covered by forest. Though we have only 25%, every year millions of hectares of the ecosystem is being destroyed. What is ecosystem? Ecosystem, it is a complex biological community. So forest is disappearing, obviously ecosystem will also disappear. If you lose the forest, then variety of different organisms will be lost. She says when she visited one of her favorite place in the forest in the year 1973, forests were not there. By the time loggers have already cut all the trees. Deforestation was taking place in a very large scale. Noticing all this, realizing the problems that we humans are going to face in the future, Vandana Shiva decided to become one of the volunteers for Chipko movement. When she noticed that, she felt down in the mouth. There were no words. She was very unhappy about the human activities. So she decided to become one of the volunteers of Chipko movement, and she started making use of every of her vacation, every of her leisure time, doing padayatras, documenting the rate of destruction of the environment, destruction of the forest, and the activities of forest officers, forest officials, and spreading the message of Chipko to everyone that she meets. In the year 1973, she has become one of the volunteers of Chipko movement and started conserving the biodiversity and started conserving the forest ecosystem. Next, in the next paragraph, Vandana Shiva is going to picturize one of the dramatic incident that took place in the Himalayan village of Advani in the year 1977. So, what is that dramatic incident? Let us see. One of the dramatic Chipko actions took place in the Himalayan village of Advani in 1977 when a village woman named Bachini Devi led resistance against her own husband who had obtained a contract to cut trees. So, in the year 1977, one of the Chipko activists and also a peasant woman who participated in Chipko movement, she raised her voice against her own husband. A woman by the name Bachini Devi, she started raising her voice. She started opposing her own husband for obtaining a contract from the government to cut down all the trees in that locality, in that region. So we must understand, Bachini Devi as a woman, she has a family. In fact, the person who had obtained a contract, her own husband, she has children, she has other works to do at home, she has her own responsibility. But here, Bachini Devi is not bothering about the family, but she is bothering about the forest. She is more bothered about the ecosystem that she is going to lose. Next, she continues, when officials arrived at the forest, the women held up lighted lanterns, although it was broad daylight. The forester asked them to explain. The women replied. Let us see next. So when Bachini Devi, along with her supporters, along with other female activists of Chipko, started raising her voice against her own husband, started opposing her own husband by hugging the trees, not to allow them to cut down the trees. When this protest started, forest officials, forest officers, those who had given this contract to Bachini Devi's husband had come there. So they had presented themselves over there. When officials arrived at the forest, the women held up lighted lanterns, although it was broad daylight. It was a clear daylight. Though it was a broad daylight, the women who gathered there to protest, they held up a lighted lanterns. Lantern is nothing but it is a lamp which can be carried from one place to another place. These days they are not to be seen, but they are used for interior designing. So I'll just draw. So you must have seen these kind of lamps. You have a handle here and it is designed in such a way to avoid or to prevent the breeze. You have the flame in the middle and which gives out the light. So you have the handle so that it could be carried from one place to another place. These lanterns were held up women of Advani. So they held up lighted lanterns. Now the question is, why did women of Garhwal, in order to protest, hold up the lighted lanterns? So the lighted lanterns are the symbolic representation of two things. One is the symbolic representation of knowledge. Light gives you the knowledge. Okay, so lantern is the symbolic representation of knowledge, and another one in this context, it is also the symbolic representation of protest. So let us take the first one, the symbolic representation of the knowledge. So why did women hold up this lighted lantern? Because female activists are illiterates. These illiterate women know the real value of the forest, whereas the people and the forest officials, those who have studied the forestry, they don't know the real value of the forest. That is what, it is the lighted lantern is the symbolic representation of knowledge. The women are going to teach forest officials about forestry. Next, protest. So another thing, they held up the lighted lantern in order to draw the attention of the forest officials when they came. Here we are, the activists, we are protesting against you, we are protesting against the loggers. We won't allow you to cut down the trees. To draw the attention of those officials, they might have held up this lantern. And next, forester asked them to explain. Yes, when officials came, they asked those women to explain. Why have they come over there? What are they doing? Why are they hugging the trees? So now the women replied, not one, not only Bachini Devi, every activist who are there, they replied, we have come to teach you the forestry. So what did they say? The women said, we have come here to teach you the forestry. In order to become a forest official, forest officer, you must be trained. There you will learn a lot of things about forestry. But here, they have not understood, they have not realized the real value of forest. Here, these women are going to teach them the forestry. So see, he retorted. So one of the forest officials replied back. Retorted is nothing but replied. You foolish women, how can you prevent trees felling by those who know the value of the forest? Do you know what forests bear? They produce profit, resin and timber. See, so when they said, we have come here to teach you the forestry, he replied them back. What did he say? He said, you foolish women, you illiterate women, how can you teach the forestry to the people who have already studied the forestry? And how can you stop a tree felling down by a person who studied the forestry? You are foolish. You can't stop. You can't prevent this. And also ask, do you know what forest bear? According to the person who studied forestry, according to him, the forest bear the resin and timber. The forest produces the profit. So they are doing this logging business for the profit. But for the women, it is not the money, it is not the income, it is not the timber, but the basic facilities that they get, basic needs like water, pure air. That is the reason why these women, they sang back in chorus one of the beautiful, stanzas, again from a folk song which awakes every, person. In fact, which awakes those forest officials. So, see, the women sang back in chorus, and now this poem or this song that they are going to sing is an answer for the question or for the statement that forest official has made. Do you know what the forest bear? According to him, it produces the profit. It bears only the resin and timber. You should know what is resin. Resin is nothing but, it is a rubbery kind of substances which is mainly obtained by the bark of a tree. And you must have heard about rubber trees, and that forest produces profit. And now women sang back in chorus. It is a reply to their question. What do the forest bear? The women ask. By singing this song, the women are asking the forest official, what do the forest bear? What do they bear? Soil, water and pure air. Soil, water and pure air sustain the earth, all she bear. Sustain the earth and all she bears. So these women, since they know the real value, they have given a very strong reply to the forest officials and says, do you know what the forest bear? It is not the timber, it is not the profit, it is not the resin, but it bears the soil, water and pure air. It gives you the soil, the pure soil. It gives you the pure, air, underground water, pure water. Where do you get all these things? From the forest. And soil, water and pure air sustain the earth. Sustain is nothing but it strengthens these three things, soil, water and pure air. These three things strengthen the earth and all she bears. So dear students, with this song, Vandana Shiva puts a full stop to the first part of our essay, and let us stop here. In the next class, let us discuss the next part of this article, that is beyond monoculture. Thank you.